I want to move on to the serious topic. Not that what we discussed wasn't serious, but more serious, further seriousness.
Serious or
Yeah, dude, you sound very serious right now.
yeah.
Oh, I have to adjust myself. I'm not used to being this serious on the pod. But it is now, because a serious topic to discuss, free from our usual sarcasm and wit, in the discussion on men's mental health. I would genuinely like your take on the matter from all three of you blokes. As a warning, I'll say that there may be some triggering statistics and discussions had in the next 10 minutes, advising to anyone in a fragile state of mind right now, assess for yourself whether you'd like to continue or come back to this episode later, because this is Fight the Devil, and in this case, after all, it's about fighting the black dog being the darkness, the persistent and oppressive force of low spirits / moods. It's a term popularized by Winston Churchill. Now, we'll launch right to the hard facts so as to not make this a taboo subject. As per
killer of men our age is suicide.
Okay, now you're making me laugh, Callum.
Sorry.
All right.
But that is a hard statistic. The biggest killer of men aged like 21 to 40 or something is suicide in this country.
Yeah, it is. It is.
way
Yes.
too
So
high. It is way too high.
I'll discuss the stats I have here, then I'll get the boys' thoughts. So, as per Suicide Prevention Australian website, 3,249 Australians died by suicide in 2022. Unfortunately, the leading cause of death, people aged between 15 to 24. But most relevant to us, as Callum mentioned, probably common knowledge amongst Australians that males do account for 3/4 of deaths by suicide, 75.3%, which means 24.7% accounted by females. Now, the point of discussion to be had amongst this group is the idea is that men don't talk about their feelings. This stigma really shits me, and I don't believe in it from my own personal experiences, but I'll provide some facts on this first, do my take, and then get the Dream Team's thoughts. Research I've done through articles in Zurich, Australia on men's mental health showed that in Men's Charity Health Movember, they found that nearly a third of men feel pressure to be manly or masculine. 47% of that survey were men between 18 to 34, so myself, Callum, and Roan. And 38% of men don't talk to others about their feelings to maintain appearance of manliness. Now, I know from the best part of the last 9 months getting to know you blokes that none of us fall into that category of maintaining a certain image, particularly if it pertains to being a real man, all jokes aside of what we discussed earlier. I personally have hardly felt rejected on discussing my emotions and feelings on life and everything going on in it through the dozens of close friendships I've had in the last 20 years. And I can only recall, 1 or 2 pushbacks to expressing like my feelings from just about 60 or 70 close friends that have come along. So those are only 2 bad examples out of hundreds and hundreds of easy interactions I've had with close male friends where there's been no issue getting stuff off my chest and having a vent and moving on without bottling up all that bullshit that usually clouds judgment and wears me down. I have a lot more to say on this matter and how it relates to us, given we are men and we play a great role in society by our line of work alone. But Callum, let's start with your thoughts on the stigma that men don't talk about their feelings, and it's up to you about how comfortable you feel to link that to the stats I read from Suicide Prevention Australia. Go ahead.
I mean, look, my personal experience is that everyone, or a large majority of the guys that I speak to, probably don't fall into that category of stigmatizing it. I think everyone's got a pretty level-headed approach. I mean, having experienced mental health issues in the past, I try and make a point to, tell the boys I love them, not in a joking kind of, yeah, you're a kind of hot boy, but more in just a, someone's out there looking out for you, and someone does care about you kind of way. Because I think it's really important, because I am sort of widely aware. I mean, there was a point in my life where out of my sort of 4 closest mates, 3 of them were being medicated for mental health issues, and seeing that and experiencing stuff like that really does kind of impact you, Like, how could it not affect you knowing that all your best mates are feeling so low that they need, a boost because they're unwell? Yep. And I think that's another point is removing the stigma of taking medication, because like if you had the flu, you'd take tablets for it. Just because the disease is maybe not so visible doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and doesn't mean that medicating an illness is wrong. So I would have to say that I'm very much of the same line of thought as you, Luke, which is that blokes should be sharing with each other, should be open with each other and supporting one another. Because yeah, like as you said, the statistic is just fucking horrible. And I think if I was to lose a close mate to that, it would destroy me, because you'd be in those looping thoughts of what could I have done better? Was I not reaching out, and just not knowing, because you'd hope that your close mates you would share with one another. That's the point of being a close mate, is to lean on each other. And I think that it's a terribly sad thing, honestly.
Yep.
And I wish it would change.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, your thoughts?
It's always been like an interesting thing for me, because like yeah, I've got so many mates who I know my core group of mates, and like same as Callie, you always tell you guys you love them and everything. Like I think especially with like sort of my close group of friends, I think about 2 to 3 years ago, there was all this period of time where all of us were not in a great headspace, and I think that was the most important time that we all leaned on each other. And I think it's that idea of a support system that is so important. I think and I know that you guys are kind of like, you're not super on social media a lot. You've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. I think someone who is I actually I'm very involved in it, and I do a lot of work on it. You understand why as well, because there is this. It is become like this sort of rat race competition of who has the best life, and look at what I'm doing. Sad that you're not, and it becomes this really horrible sort of like stigmatized version of reality, like competitive in a way. And I think that a lot of young men and women often fall victim to that. I think it's so alarming at like teen suicides, like at a place of work. I won't be too specific, but we have done organizations of wakes, and those like really heartbreaking ones where you see like a person who's and all of the guests are school children, and it is just really horrible to see. And I think that like while I've never lost anyone due to mental health reasons, thank God, but I've had instances where even like the happiest, like, most bubbly guy I know, there was this one point where all of a sudden it just hit you like a freight train, that like he was in a really bad headspace because he had tried to exert all of his energy into picking up the spirits of someone who was from a broken home, and unfortunately had those sort of thoughts, and he was trying to be a mentor to them with everything he could, and it was just like it just wasn't giving at a certain point, and it kind of just crushed him. And it's like, even for those people who might on the outside appear all happy and bubbly, it's like even that can be an extremely exhausting and taxing thing. And it's like I and I know it's like something that I got to work on as well, just being able to identify those little sort of things or chinks in the armor of someone, because there's been situations where I just haven't known or haven't been able to recognize. Great. So it's really difficult. It's really difficult to identify. As much as we want to prevent it, there is a reason that like it's this sort of like just silent killer that just gnaws away on people. And like, okay, I might be going on a bit of a tangent, but Joe the bear, the main character's brother, is a victim of suicide. And there's this great monologue he had about everyone loves him. He was the most, he'd light up the room when you go inside. But on the inside, he was just hurting. And unfortunately, he never spoke up, never asked, and he only found out he was depressed way too late. And I think, that to me is one of the most scary thoughts. Just not even being able to identify it, and then all of it, it just happening.
Yeah. El Jefe?
Yeah, look, I'm coming out from someone older than you guys, so I think from my experience, and look, I recently have been going through, you know, uh, uh, counselling with depression and so forth. And I think the biggest problem that men face is that we're always meant to be doers. We're meant to be the knight in shining armor. We've got this armor on, and yeah, it's got to be shiny. It's got to be there to go, hey, I'm here. But when you feel like, and it's the best way I can describe it's feeling like you got the armor on, you're on your horse, but you feel like shit in a tin can, because you're putting out so much to help others in whatever way you're seen to be. Yeah, I'm doing fine, I'm great. And it's that competitive thing, because if we're not seen to be doing anything, we're very quickly discarded. We're not man enough, or we're not able to do this. And it's a lot of societal pressure, I think, that falls on men as well. And it's a case of when we do pull off that horse, when the armor is cracked and we cry out for help, it's a case of, well, what good are you? And that's a big fear that I think a lot of men have, is that when we are in that position, when we are feeling vulnerable and we do reach out, but then we're isolated. And that does happen. And this is why I think a lot of men don't speak out, because they know that, you can end up being isolated, because it's a thing of, you're not pulling your weight, you're not doing what you should, you know. And I think it's just a huge problem, and I think it's still happening in a lot of ways. I know in my generation, you had to be. It's that competitive thing, because there's a common saying that a man is judged by his potential, and if you're not fulfilling that potential, especially for you younger guys, if you're not measuring up, it's a case of you can be quickly discarded, not only by the women in your life, but your friends, your opportunities decline, if you don't have the degree and if you don't have the connections and the network and all that sort of stuff. It's very easy to get disconnected and isolated. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problem I think men face is isolation. If you look at the rates of men that have not been in relationships, especially for you younger guys, I think this is the scariest thing I'm actually seeing, is the amount of men that aren't able to form healthy relationships.
The
And
loneliness
that's that
epidemic.
isolation.
I feel like everyone expects you to be that knight in shining armor, but history has told us that a person with shiny armor has never fought a battle.
Yep.
If you've got brand spanking new armor, I'm going to target the shit out of you because you've never fucking trained.
Yeah.
I think
there
like
is
people
that,
with dents in their armor and shit.
Yeah.
Just to use that as a metaphor, I think that shows courage and that shows experience.
But let me reverse that for a second and somebody might see those dents, those scratches, those marks.
Yeah,
You
and it's
might
not as
honor it.
attractive.
You would honor it. Other people will see trauma, and I don't want to take on that trauma.
Yeah, which is a sad thing.
It is. And I think this is where isolation is, a problem. You've got men that are not confident. What's the point of being confident? What's the point of being out there when all I'm going to do is get trashed? And the amount of, and there was a statistic of the amount of men that have actually been in relationships under the age of 30, and it was astronomically high of those that have never had a relationship. And I think this is where there is major problems, and I think it's really going to make matters much, much worse for men. There are 101 different reasons. I'm going to put it down to a combination of dating apps, the easy access of porn. I think it's a huge problem, absolutely massive problem. The way society is structured, especially in the West, where basically, 6 foot, 6-pack, 6-figure income mentality comes into it. And it's men that are worse at this than anyone else. Unless you've got all that happening, forget it, guys. You're just not in the running. And I think it's that popularization. I don't think it's as bad or anywhere near as bad as, you see online and everything like that, but there is a certain mentality. I think isolation is the biggest problem men are facing, and where, I know when I've been through a bad patch, when I got divorced 20 odd years ago, I had my head right up my arse. I couldn't see daylight for the life of me. And a couple of mates came around and said, "Yep, we're dragging you out. We're going to the gym. We're going to play racquetball. You're going to get moving because, quite frankly, if you keep doing this, you're going to fucking die." They got me out. They got my head out of my ass. I had fun. I enjoyed it. I was doing something to improve myself, getting, and that physicality, I think, was important. We didn't need to discuss anything. They knew what was going on. They knew what I was experiencing. But instead of talking about it, we did something. And I think that's another way in which men really need to connect is it's not so much men don't need to talk about our feelings as such. We experience them. We don't need to talk
Yeah.
about them. We experience them. We can see it. We know. Let's just go and do something. Let's go play pool. Let's go
That's
to
why,
a footy match. All that sort of stuff. And I think
Yeah.
that's that connection that's important.
yeah, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
I think that's so valuable what you said, because I find that guys, like, the conversation can be quite inorganic if you're catching up for that sole purpose, which is why I find it really helpful when I'm like catching up with the boys to paint miniatures, because that's our outlet, because we're doing something else. We're doing an activity, but on the side of doing that activity, we are also, taking that chance to have a chat,
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
guys can be really good at that. You've got to organize, go play pool, go
Yeah.
watch the footy, go do something. So you're doing
Yeah.
something, and then you're doing something. Because to be honest, like, I know that girls will, and I'm generalizing here, but like my missus loves to do this. She'll catch up for like a brunch or something. I can't do that. I can't sit there and just talk. I have to be
Yeah.
doing something while I'm talking.
Exactly.
So,
And
which
guys
is
are
why I
different.
find it so
Yeah.
helpful to
Yeah.
catch up and paint the minis or do something like that.
Yeah. And this is where I think men, it's like I said, men experience the emotion. We don't need to talk about it. We can see it. We know because we've all experienced it. It's quite not a, yeah, I know, mate. It's all good. Let's go have a beer and let's get your head out of your ass and get you to
Yeah.
see the bigger picture. And I think that's
Yeah.
what
Oh, that's
men
it.
do for each other. Women need to dissect, they need to analyze, they need to find out why things have happened. Men just know why it's happened. They understand exactly why it's happened. It's cause and effect. Women need to dissect it, they need to analyze it and all that, which is great. Women can do that. Men don't do that as much because we experience emotion. We know what's caused it. It's cause and effect. What we need to be able to do is pull ourselves out of our own introspection. It's good to have a little bit, of course, but we need to not have it be the core of our experience. And I think that's where, for myself, I've been through shit. You don't get to my age without experiencing things in life. I could go, yep, that's been my experience and that's what I'm going to build myself on. Or I could not do that and, take away some of the introspection, some of that sort of stuff. And I know for me, I'm fairly creative. I write, I do a few other bits and pieces here and there. And for me, that's something I can build on instead of being, self-centered, oh, woe is me type. And I think
Yeah.
that's where we really need to address. I think a lot of men's health is pulling people out of introspection.
Yes.
Too much introspection. It's something you can't build on it, basically. Especially when you feel shit about yourself. You're not building on a good, solid foundation.
Yeah. Too much time on your own is not good, which is why COVID
Definitely not.
isolation was a really hard
Yeah.
time in life.
Oh, look, it did my head in, that's for sure.
Yeah.
For a few reasons. One, I've got ADHD, neurodiverse. So for me being on my own, my brain went, oh, yeah, you're on Medicaid. Well, I didn't know I had ADHD until brain went completely spasmodic on me. And yeah.
A very good conversation had in episode number 4 that we did together, Jeff. So in great depth. We covered that one, and terribly sorry to hear. Just to peel it back, Jeff. Terribly sorry to hear that you're obviously going through counselling sessions with depression. You don't have to go into too much detail, Jeff, but have you been able to? Has this helped, and have you been able to help identify kind of what's gotten you to this stage of depression?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's basically the things that we believe about ourselves that aren't the best.
Yeah.
That we reinforce, because I think the thing that men do is we punish ourselves first and foremost
So bad.
before anything else. And when we punish ourselves, we put ourselves in a really negative position, really negative light. We don't see the value in which we have as individuals. Our value tends to be based on what are you able to provide, what is your potential, what is your future, what is your stability like, basically the knight in shining armor. And that's how we want to see ourselves. We want to be the good guy, the guy that rides in to save everyone, whoever needs saving. We are the defenders. We're manly men who do manly things, basically. And when we fail at doing that, we punish ourselves, because there's no one else that's interested in doing so. And that's part of that isolation, because we don't feel good enough. We don't measure up, and therefore we don't belong in society. Hence, a lot of men are shutting themselves off.
Wow. Yeah, you've pointed out so many things that really clicked with me, Jeff. No doubt the counsellors helped to bring that to light in terms of what we feel our role is to play. Continue to seek out this help that you're getting, because that's really clicked with me. Only like 2 minutes of discussion.
No, I'm pretty much finished with that. So, look, I know I'm in a better place. I've accepted the fact that I'm not perfect. Everyone else was aware of it. I wasn't. However, it's one of those things that there is a lot of conditioning that men experience that, for my generation and older, don't be weak.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, Jeff, because like your generation would have had a very different stigma towards men's mental health. To be like, was it legitimate? It would have been like kind of just like shut up and take it almost like.
It was starting to change. It was starting to change, and I noticed this in the 90s, because coming from the generation of hippies and so forth, get in touch with your feelings and everything like that. And then there's this whole thing of the women's liberation movement through the 70s and into the 80s. And what happened is that you've got a lot of displacement of men. You're also looking at, manufacturing shutting down in Australia. So the manly man jobs were disappearing. And you had this realignment of what it actually means to be a man in this world today. And coming through that, there were a few issues with men's mental health, but I think it was more aimed at stopping some of the worst aspects of male problems, which is like, domestic violence, which is very, very prevalent. And unfortunately, I think with the way things are at the moment, it's not going to get any better until we really start looking at how to stop men from isolating.
It's also, and not to excuse it in any way, shape or form, but it is symptomatic. It's not the root cause of the problem. It's a symptom of the powerlessness, of the depression, the poor feelings, because essentially what they're trying to do is feel big and strong.
It's empowerment. That's really what it comes down to.
It's a completely wrong fucking way to go about it.
It's completely the wrong way.
But it's a symptom of those feelings of powerlessness, isolation.
Yep. And I think it also, this is where I think it spins into whole different aspects, and this is why you've got the rise of MAGA. Make something great again. I am not great. Therefore, if I make America great, for example, I'm going to make myself great again. And this is, as a male collective, we've got a very, very fucking big problem where if we're not feeling good, if we're not feeling great, if we're not feeling proud of who we are, we're taught it's misogynistic, which is a word that gets used far too often, I think. we're not allowed to have choice. We're not allowed to have, our preferences and so forth. And I think, if a man expresses an idea, could easily be turned around and called, oh, you're being misogynistic. It's like men's groups. You try and form a men's group somewhere, and even for the pure purposes of saying, hey, look, we need to do something. We need to address these issues that men are having. And the fallout and the bite back on it is kind of scary, because it's a case of it's seen to be something where it's not. It needs to be, it's got to be something that men are doing for men. There needs to be a better way for us to communicate.
Yes. I also think it's a very exhausting lifestyle to have to wear a mask in public about what you want to convince others of who you are and what you're all about, to then have to peel that mask off at home and just feel totally shit and down the dumps. And I can't imagine living like that. I know what you see is what you get, and I like to think it's the same with all three of us. Jeff, you've enlightened me on what you've gone through, but in recent terms. But no, that's probably why I've taken a liking to all you guys as the dream team. As far as I see, we're not wearing masks. We ain't maintaining an image. What you see is what you get, and that's the best part of this group for sure, from my perspective.
Yeah, it certainly does take away from isolation. I'll give it that much. It's awesome, and loving the work that you're doing there, Luke.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. I'll be sending my big thank yous at the end of this pod, but I want to highlight one particular day that was really fun. I reckon. Oh, mate, it was definitely this year, probably a couple of months ago. I was having a kind of crappy afternoon in the standing area, came back to the sitting to where you guys were sitting, just in a bit of a whirlwind and really wanting out. But the last 15 minutes of that day, it made my day. I was laughing so much, Jeff, at all those car steering jokes. I was just steering the wrong direction, and I think you talked about you just got a service for your car. And we went, it was one thing to another, and I laughed my ass off and that made my day. I completely forgot about all the other shit I was going through my head, because that was just funny.
I'm glad my pain brought you some joy.
Yeah, and that's all it takes really from me, and I can only encourage just a bit of laughter amongst a good bunch of bunch of friends.
Yeah,
bunch of mates that you guys have become, and I couldn't believe internally. I was like really just buggered for the day. I couldn't believe how much it swiveled by just a few laughs around yourself, Jeff, and everyone else, and Callum and Roan. It was just awesome.
Yeah. Oh, you got to have days like that.
Moral of the story: never underestimate the power of a good laugh.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right. I'm really happy we got all the thoughts from you guys. It's something I wanted to discuss for a while. Any further takes on the matter before we jump back into the fun stuff?
Look, there is one thing that regarding men's health that does scare me a little bit, and that is the incel culture.
Yes.
I don't think it is at all healthy, and this is something I would say to any young guy that's looking down that path and feeling absolutely worthless about themselves, that I can't win, I can't beat the Chads, as it were, as they say. I think it's really leading down to that path of isolation, that cutting off. You start getting these delusions of grandeur that and this is where that incel community, says, oh, you're worth more than that. You got to do this, you got to do that. And it leads down to some really dark places. And I think there was that guy that in the US, it really kicked a lot of the concerns off, where he went
Andrew Tate.
Not Tate. Tate's a joke.
Elliot,
and I think
you're
most
talking about
people's
Elliot.
theme is that. It's the deeper, the 4chan boards and so forth. It's where you're going deep dive, and this is what men do, especially those of us with ADHD. We'll deep dive on stuff. We'll get hyper focused. And I think that is a real big worry, because I think what's happening is that men have evaluated themselves on bullshit, basically. Material wealth, how hot's your chick, all that kind of stuff. And it's just, there is no self-worth in these equations. It's, what is it about you that is valuable to others? or to yourself? What is it that gives you joy? And I think these are often not asked questions, especially that, what is it that brings you joy? What is it that gives you happiness? What is it that makes you feel connected? What is it that needs, what is it that helps you grow? And I think a lot of these questions are missed in these type of the communities. They rebuild this false sense of self, and
Yes.
they then prey upon it, and give up, give up on society, give up on it all because you're not going to win. But if enough of us do it, things will change, and they won't. It just makes things worse because, unfortunately, when you start doing that, you isolate, you cut yourself off, people will walk away. Society's going to carry on without you, unfortunately, and I that's what worries me. We need a better way of connecting. It doesn't have to be, let's talk about your feelings, because men don't do that by nature. It's not what we need. We understand our feelings, we experience them, we know where they've come from. We might need to analyse exactly what we're feeling. We might need to reevaluate where they're actually coming from, but that takes time. But we need to get our heads out of our asses, basically, and
Equally to that,
enjoy
though,
life.
Speaking to someone is something that I would recommend everyone do.
Oh yeah, professional,
Yeah.
Professional.
or professional. Yeah.
Yep.
If you haven't got somebody close enough to you where you can go, hey, look, my head's a bit fucked up.
Even if you do,
Yeah,
even if
if
you
you've
do,
got that, right? Yeah,
I've found, speaking with a professional to be even just verbalizing your feelings, your concerns can be such a fantastic thing.
And look, the other thing I think that's really good is that you're able to analyze and look at it at a practical way. Whereas I think this is what men fear, is that it's not going to be practical. It's going to be long-winded. It's just not going to do anything. And a lot of men, believe me, have that opinion. Oh, it won't do anything. It's not going to change anything. And a lot of men get that
I feel
stuck
like
in their
that's
head.
like, as someone who, like, just saying it out loud helps you to understand what you're feeling.
Yeah, because
You
course.
feel it's silly when people say, "Well, why would I go speak to?" Well, because even when you just say it out loud, you'll go, "Oh shit, okay, so that's that's what I was feeling, and I can probably understand why I was feeling that."
And it allows you to disconnect from the experience and the feeling, and go, okay, I can see it's like a roadmap. I know, I know where I began. I know how I ended up here. This is the way I should have gone. And you can make those adjustments. It's allowing you to disconnect.
Sorry, just tending to my dog who's just acting like a nut at the moment. Roan, did you have did you have something to add on before we jump back to the fun stuff?
No, I think. Look, yeah, you guys have covered it really well. My breadth of experience in this is not as, I guess, wholesale as others. So, I think I learned a lot as well. So it is awesome to hear.
That is great to hear, Roan. I would have thought otherwise, having read the amazing 400-page bestseller, like father, like daughter, a lot of psychological and environmental issues that's corrupted so many states of mind in the characters put forth there,
Yeah.
Roan. So
Yeah.
you've done well to conjure that up on your own, having not, from what you told me.
Maybe subconsciously, yeah.
Done well.
Done well to hide it.
Mm.
So just adding on from my intro in part 1, if I haven't said it before, I'll say it now. I love the camaraderie amongst the Dream Team, in that it's a space free from envy, greed, and superficiality. Those are devils that can be really difficult to endure, especially if it comes from within your inner circle of friends. I think we've all been there, where we have someone close and they turn on you with those 3 vices, those devils. It's happened to me plenty of times. But I admire the fact that there's none of that bullshit amongst the boys. As you can tell, there's a time to be funny and a time to be serious, and we've had a great measure of both so far in this pod. Being real is a non-negotiable. I'm confident in saying that each of us are characters in our own right, but there is not one single narcissistic bone in our body. We could each be capable of being self-obsessed, self-indulgent, and manipulative. More devils to be sucked in, but we choose the path of righteousness. Why? Because we're not dickheads to start with. We don't sell out. And ultimately, deceit is for scumbags. Pride is forever. So stay tuned for more in the final parts where we take the absolute piss out of one another in hilarious segments to come in the next few parts of Dream Team Podcast Round 2.